Rich Danker is on the line with us. He is the Economics Director for American Principles in Action, APIA, the co-author of the report Building a Winning GOP Coalition, the Lessons of 2012. And the website is AmericanPrinciplesInAction.org, all spelled out just like that. Rich, welcome to the program.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for joining us. You are making the argument that unemployment benefit extensions are bad things. Do I have that right?
That's right. I think they've been extended, obviously, several times the last few years, and I think they're a understandable and sympathetic reaction to what happened in the economic crash, but they've been a bad thing for the unemployment situation as it's panned out. Yeah.
How is it that unemployment benefits cause unemployment?
Well, for one, they enable they discourage the job-seeking process from happening. They sort of inhibit it.
So people are more likely to look for a job if they don't have the money for gas and if they're hungry.
They're less likely to look for a job if a good chunk of their income is being replaced for 2 years or so. Yeah. And they're less likely to move to where the jobs are, and that's a problem we've seen because there's a lot of disparity in state economies over the employment prospects.
Well, I read the study that you cited, and much of the math in it is over my head, but the essence of it seemed to be that when people lose their unemployment benefits, then they are sufficiently desperate to take jobs that they wouldn't have otherwise taken. In other words, you've got somebody with a master's degree in electrical engineering, and they've been looking for any kind of job in electrical engineering or even around electricity for years and years and years, or for 2 years, and they haven't been able to find one, or for a year, actually for 26 weeks is federal unemployment benefits. And when their benefits run out, they say, "Oh, screw it," and they go to work at McDonald's for $7 or $8 an hour. Or 9 or 10 or whatever McDonald's pays, but they end up taking a job for which they're not qualified. I don't see how that's a good thing.
Well, the example is not always that extreme, or usually that extreme.
Well, that was the rationale for the entire study. It's right there in the first three paragraphs.
And I agree with it. And you're proving the point that when the benefits do run out, they are likely to encourage employment and hiring, even if it's in a different industry or a level below what the person had started off or been laid off from in the economic crash.
But shouldn't we instead be talking about policies that will bring jobs back home, like going back to the pre-Clinton era, the pre-Reagan era, when we actually had tariffs that protected our domestic industries? Abandoning these so-called free trade agreements, taking our minimum wage back up to $10.10 an hour where it was in 1968, that kind of stuff. I mean, isn't this the simple, straightforward stuff rather than saying to people, "I'm sorry, the system's screwed up. We're not going to bother with that. And by the way, you're out of luck. And so what? You got $60,000 in college loans, and you've got a master's degree in electrical engineering. You're going to have to flip burgers for the rest of your life."
Well, we could forgive student loan debt in bankruptcy. That might be one thing we can agree on. But if you do want to go back to the pre-Clinton era and give up NAFTA to go back to the Reagan years, I'm with you on that. I'll go back to those tax levels because I think that they resulted in more job gains and a better economy. I mean, Europe created no net jobs in that 80s, 90s economic boom. And meanwhile, the U.S. economy had one of its best runs in history.
Oh, yeah. So Reagan tripled the national debt. I mean, spending debt-based federal spending, he massively increased the size of government, and particularly with Star Wars, that was $1 trillion just in and of itself. You can really stimulate an economy that way. Keep in mind, Reagan also had the biggest crash since 1929 during his presidency, and it was just after his tax cuts. And so then he kicked in with the stimulus spending.
Hardly anybody lost their jobs when the market crashed in '87, unlike in 2008.
Yeah, well, that's because it came back because he was spending money like crazy, and Congress was right there with him doing it. And now, when the president tries to spend money, Congress says no. In fact, we're going to cut the amount of money that you're spending.
I think it's about the return on investment in public spending, right? So when Reagan did it, it was in the Cold War, and whether you agreed or not, you saw that was the purpose. now when Obama does it, I think we don't really understand what the point is. I mean, the stimulus, for instance, did that do much to decrease the employment?
Yes, we went from losing 700,000 jobs a month to making roughly 100,000 jobs a month, and some months more, some months less. But that's been probably the neighborhood of the average for about the last 3.5 years.
And it's the slowest recovery really in modern times, and it's
because Republican governors have laid off over 600,000 people. Because
if you look at the public sector firings, I mean, or layoffs, they've been a really small chunk of the unemployment rate. I mean, there's news media, crunch those numbers.
Yeah, my point. So why don't we go back to a rational trade policy that brings our jobs home? Why don't Nancy Pelosi? She got it passed out of the House of Representatives, a bill that said we are no longer going to give tax breaks, tax incentives to companies to close down factories in the United States and ship them over to China and rebuild them in China. We're no longer going to finance that, and in fact, we will finance by virtue of tax breaks companies that want to close factories in China and move them back to the United States. And that was filibustered by Republicans in the Senate. Why?
Well, they believe in free trade, and I think they would love to see those jobs.
I don't think they believe in free trade. I think they did it because they knew that it would have stimulated the economy, and they do not want this president to have a decent legacy. They want history to look back on President Obama as, oh, he was that president during the 8 years when America did not work.
Well, I mean,
I think they are willing to destroy the middle class and destroy people's lives in order to tarnish his reputation.
I'll certainly admit it sounds like that sometimes, but the problem is both parties are really out of ideas about how to reignite the economy.
Democrats have a whole bunch of ideas. I mean, there were 236 pieces of legislation that Nancy Pelosi passed during the 2 years that she was Speaker of the House, in the first 2 years, that every single one of which was filibustered by Republicans in the Senate and never got made into law, that would have created jobs in the United States. That one about trade is one of the most conspicuous, but there's a whole bunch of others. And you were talking about return on investment, and I think this is really a big deal. Reagan's $1 trillion investment in Star Wars, when you put money into military projects, you don't get a return. You build a bomb and drop it on somebody, that money's gone. If you take that same $1 trillion that Reagan spent on Star Wars and instead spend it on building schools or hospitals or bridges or roads or high-speed rail, it will provide the soil in which business can grow for generations.
Well, it's only worth it if we really need those things. And do we need high-speed rail? Is that more efficient out in California than actually driving between two cities?
I encourage you to visit Europe and try high-speed rail. Cross France. France is probably about the same number of square miles as California. It's not as long, but it's a lot wider. On their high-speed rail, going 240 miles an hour. It's amazing, and you can walk with a wine glass in your hand, no problem.
I think I prefer EasyJet, but it's another debate. You can be anywhere in an hour in Europe on a plane. You don't really need high-speed rail.
You can't be anywhere in Europe in an hour. You can be in any major city, but with high-speed rail and with rail, you can be anywhere, literally anywhere, and or at least any town over 15 or 20,000 people. But my point is that when you invest in infrastructure, you actually get a return on that investment. You invest $1 billion, you get back tens of billions of dollars in taxes over the next few decades, whereas when you invest in Star Wars, you get back nothing. So
as long as you pick the right infrastructure.
Yeah.
Well, not the 261 things Pelosi wants to do, but some of those might be right.
Rich Danker, the website AmericanPrinciplesInAction.org. Rich, thanks for dropping by.
Okay, Tom. Thanks for having me.